The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the dense jungles of Vietnam. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of damp earth, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. Private Jake Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart pounding in his chest as he moved cautiously through the underbrush with his squad. They had been on patrol for days, the oppressive heat and the constant threat of ambush weighing heavily on their minds. It was early evening when they first heard it, a low, rumbling sound that felt more like a tremor than a noise. The jungle seemed to shudder around them, the trees swaying as if caught in an unseen wind. "What the hell was that?" whispered Corporal Ramirez, his eyes wide with dread. The others exchanged nervous glances, their instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently. The soldiers stumbled, grasping at tree trunks for support as the earth convulsed. "Get down!" Sergeant Miller barked, but it was too late. The jungle erupted in chaos, branches snapping and foliage crashing to the ground. And then, from the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged, a grotesque silhouette that seemed to absorb the fading light. The soldiers froze, their breaths hitching in their throats. The figure was tall and emaciated, its skin a sickly gray, stretched tight over bones that protruded like jagged rocks. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, and a grin split its face, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Welcome to my domain," it hissed, the voice slithering into their minds like a serpent. "You've wandered far from home, little soldiers." The devil in the jungle had come to claim them. Panic erupted as the soldiers scrambled to retreat, but the jungle had become a living nightmare. The trees twisted and contorted, blocking their path, while the ground opened up in gaping fissures, swallowing the fallen leaves and debris. They could hear the whispers of the jungle, a cacophony of voices that seemed to mock their fear. As they fought to escape, they stumbled upon a clearing, only to find it littered with the remnants of battles long past. The bodies of soldiers, both American and Viet Cong, lay strewn about, their eyes wide with terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. Among them, a group of figures began to rise, moving with an unsettling grace. The walking dead had come to life, their forms twisted and grotesque, mimicking the very soldiers who had once fought in this cursed land. "Shoot them!" shouted Private Thompson, raising his rifle, but his hands trembled. The dead soldiers wore the uniforms of the Viet Cong, their faces a haunting reflection of the living. They moved with an eerie familiarity, as if they were mocking the very essence of what it meant to be a soldier. The air was thick with a sense of futility, and the jungle echoed with the sound of their hollow laughter. Just as the soldiers began to fire, a hiss sliced through the air. From the underbrush slithered a serpent, its scales glimmering like polished obsidian. The spitting venom snake was a creature of nightmares, its eyes glinting with malice. With a swift motion, it launched a stream of venom toward the soldiers, a noxious spray that caught Thompson square in the eyes. "Ah!" he screamed, clawing at his face as darkness enveloped him. The world became a blur of shadows and shapes, and he could hear the chaos around him, the gunfire, the shouts of his comrades, the mocking laughter of the walking dead. Blinded and disoriented, he stumbled backward, crashing into the underbrush. One by one, the soldiers fell victim to the snake's venom. Ramirez cried out as he too was struck, his hands flying to his face as he collapsed to the ground. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the devil's laughter echoing in their ears as they flailed helplessly. "Fight! Fight!" Sergeant Miller urged, but his voice was drowned out by the cacophony of the jungle. The walking dead advanced, their movements fluid and deliberate, as if they were savoring the terror they instilled. The soldiers could no longer tell friend from foe. The jungle had become a twisted reflection of their own fears. In the chaos, Thompson heard a guttural growl, and the ground trembled once more. The devil had returned, looming over them like a storm cloud. "You thought you could escape?" it taunted, its voice resonating through the very earth. "This is my domain, and you are nothing but lost souls." With renewed terror, the soldiers fought against the encroaching darkness, their rifles blazing as they tried to fend off the advancing horde of the undead. But the jungle was relentless, and the devil's presence loomed over them like a suffocating shroud. Each shot fired felt like a desperate plea for salvation, but the bullets seemed to pass through the apparitions, leaving only echoes of their anguish. "Fall back!" Sergeant Miller shouted, trying to rally his men. But the jungle twisted around them, the trees shifting as if alive, blocking any route of escape. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the laughter of the dead grew louder, drowning out their cries. Thompson's vision was still clouded by the serpent's venom, but he could feel the oppressive weight of despair settling over him. He stumbled through the underbrush, trying to find his squad mates, but the shadows danced around him, taunting him with their whispers. "You're alone, Private. You're lost," they seemed to say, their voices a chilling echo of his own thoughts. Suddenly, a hand grasped his arm, pulling him back to reality. It was Corporal Ramirez, his face pale and streaked with sweat. "We have to regroup," he gasped, his voice strained. "We can't let them surround us." Thompson nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. They stumbled toward where they had last seen Sergeant Miller, the sounds of gunfire and chaos guiding them through the darkness. Each step felt like a battle against the very ground beneath them, which seemed to shift and pull them in different directions. Just as they reached a small cluster of trees where they thought they could find cover, a chilling howl echoed through the jungle. The devil's silhouette emerged once more, towering and monstrous, its eyes burning with a fierce hunger. "You think you can hide from me?" it hissed, its voice slithering into their minds. "You are already mine." The ground quaked again, and from the shadows, more figures began to rise. They were not just the dead soldiers anymore. They were the very essence of fear and despair, manifesting as grotesque caricatures of the soldiers' memories. Friends and comrades, twisted into nightmarish forms, their faces contorted in agony. "Fight!" Ramirez shouted, his voice breaking. "We have to fight!" Thompson raised his rifle, heart racing, and fired into the advancing horde. The bullets tore through the air, but the figures merely dissipated into mist, reforming just a few steps closer. It was as if the jungle itself was mocking their efforts, each shot met with an insatiable hunger that only grew stronger. "Keep firing," Miller's voice rang out, filled with desperation. "We can't let them take us." But the soldiers were losing hope. Each round fired felt like a futile gesture against an unstoppable force. The laughter of the dead reverberated through the trees, and the jungle closed in tighter, suffocating them in its embrace. Then, in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, Thompson remembered the stories he had heard from the locals, tales of spirits that haunted the jungle, feeding on the fear of those who dared to enter. "We have to confront it," he shouted, his voice rising above the din. "We can't let it control us." "Are you insane?" Ramirez yelled, panic flashing in his eyes. "It'll kill us." "No," Thompson insisted, determination surging through him. "We have to face it. We can't let it win." With a rallying cry, he charged forward, aiming his rifle at the devil's figure. The others hesitated for a moment, caught between fear and the glimmer of hope in Thompson's eyes. But as the devil's laughter echoed around them, they felt the weight of despair pressing down. One by one, they followed Thompson, their rifles raised, ready to confront the darkness. "Together!" Thompson shouted, and the soldiers formed a line, standing shoulder to shoulder against the encroaching nightmare. "We are not afraid." The devil paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it regarded the soldiers with a mixture of curiosity and rage. "You think you can defy me?" it hissed, the ground trembling beneath its feet. "Yes!" Thompson shouted, his voice ringing with newfound strength. "We are not lost souls. We are soldiers." With that declaration, the soldiers fired in unison, their bullets piercing the air like a chorus of defiance. The jungle screamed, the trees shuddering as the devil recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. The laughter of the dead faded, replaced by the roar of the jungle itself, as if the very land was responding to their courage. As the darkness began to recede, Thompson felt a surge of hope. The jungle, once a maze of terror, now seemed to part before them, revealing a path bathed in the fading light of day. The soldiers, emboldened by their unity, pressed forward, determination igniting within them. "Let's get out of here," Ramirez urged, his voice filled with urgency. They moved as one, pushing through the underbrush, the oppressive weight of fear lifting with every step they took away from the clearing. The jungle, once a cacophony of terror, now felt alive with the sounds of nature, the whispers of the wind through the leaves, a soothing balm to their frayed nerves. But as they navigated the dense foliage, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that the devil was still lurking, watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. He glanced back over his shoulder, half expecting to see the grotesque figure emerging from the shadows, but all he saw was the fading light of the sun filtering through the trees. "Keep moving," Sergeant Miller urged, his voice steady despite the chaos they had just escaped. "We need to find a safe spot before nightfall. The jungle is more dangerous after dark." They pressed on, adrenaline coursing through their veins, the bond between them strengthened by their shared experience. Each soldier was acutely aware of the others, their breaths synchronizing as they moved in a tight formation, eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. As they continued, the jungle began to change. The oppressive heat of the day gave way to a cooler breeze, and the sounds of wildlife returned, filling the air with a sense of normalcy. Thompson felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, but he knew better than to let his guard down. Suddenly, a rustling in the underbrush caused them to freeze. Thompson raised his rifle, heart racing as they all turned toward the sound. "What was that?" Ramirez whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of their hearts. "Stay alert," Miller commanded, eyes narrowed. It could be anything. The rustling grew louder, and then from the shadows, a figure emerged. Thompson's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the silhouette. It was a local villager, a woman with a weathered face and deep-set eyes, her expression a mix of concern and relief. "You're alive," she exclaimed, rushing toward them. "I feared the jungle had claimed you." "Ma'am, we need to get to safety," Thompson said, lowering his rifle but keeping it at the ready. "The jungle is not what it seems. There's something unnatural in it." The woman nodded, her face grave. "I know. The spirits are restless. They feast on fear and despair. You must come with me. I can lead you to safety." Without hesitation, they followed her, the woman moving with an ease that belied the treacherous terrain. She led them through narrow paths, avoiding the areas where the shadows seemed to thicken. Thompson felt a sense of urgency. The devil was still out there, lurking in the depths of the jungle, waiting for the right moment to strike. As they walked, the woman shared stories of the spirits that haunted the jungle, tales of soldiers who had lost their way and become trapped in a cycle of fear. "You must confront your fears," she said, glancing back at them, her eyes wise and knowing. "Only then can you find peace." Thompson pondered her words, feeling the weight of his own fears pressing down on him. He had seen too much, lost too many friends, and the memories haunted him like the walking dead from earlier. "What if we can't confront them?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You already have," she replied, her gaze steady. "You faced the devil in the jungle and chose to fight. That is the first step." As they continued, the jungle began to change once more. The oppressive shadows receded, replaced by shafts of golden light filtering through the trees. The air felt lighter, as if the very essence of the jungle was shifting in response to their determination. Finally, they reached a small clearing, a hidden sanctuary surrounded by towering trees. The woman gestured for them to enter, and they stepped into the sunlight, feeling a wave of relief wash over them. "You are safe here," she said, her voice softening. "For now." Thompson turned to his squad, their faces weary but resolute. "We made it," he said, a smile breaking through the tension. "We fought together, and we survived." But even as he spoke, a shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing. The devil's laughter echoed faintly, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The jungle had tested them, but it had not yet released its grip. "Stay vigilant," Miller warned, his eyes scanning the tree line. "We can't let our guard down." As they settled into the clearing, the woman began to prepare a small fire, her movements calm and deliberate. "Rest, soldiers," she said. "You have faced great darkness, but the light will return. Trust in each other and in yourselves." Thompson felt a renewed sense of purpose as they gathered around the fire, the flickering flames casting warm shadows on their weary faces. The jungle, once a living nightmare, now felt like a distant memory, though the echo of the devil's laughter still lingered in the back of his mind. As they sat in silence, the woman shared more stories. tales of bravery and sacrifice, of soldiers who had come before them and faced the same darkness. "You are not the first to walk this path," she said, her voice steady and soothing, "but each of you carries a light within that can guide you through even the darkest of times." Thompson listened intently, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his squad mates as they exchanged glances, their shared experience binding them together in a way he had never anticipated. The fire crackled, and the warmth seeped into their bones, a stark contrast to the cold dread that had gripped them in the jungle. "Do you think we'll ever be free of it?" Ramirez asked, breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as if he feared the answer. The woman paused, her gaze thoughtful. "Freedom comes not from the absence of fear, but from the courage to confront it. You must learn to embrace your past, to honor those you have lost, and to find strength in each other." Miller nodded, his expression resolute. "We've faced the devil and lived to tell the tale. We can't let it take us again." Thompson felt a surge of determination at Miller's words. They had fought back against the darkness, and though the devil's laughter still echoed in the recesses of their minds, they had proven that they were not lost souls. They were soldiers, and they would stand together against whatever came next. As the fire crackled and the stars began to twinkle above them, the woman shared a final story, a legend of a great warrior who had once faced a similar darkness in the jungle. "He learned that the greatest weapon against fear is unity," she said. "When he stood with his brothers and sisters, they became an unstoppable force. Together, they banished the darkness." Thompson felt the weight of her words settle in his heart. They had faced the devil and emerged stronger, but the battle was not over. They needed to prepare for whatever darkness lay ahead. "Let's make a plan," he said, his voice steady. "We can't stay here forever. We need to find a way out of the jungle and back to safety." Miller nodded in agreement. "We'll scout the area at first light. We need to stay alert and work together." The others murmured their agreement, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within them. They would not let fear dictate their fate. They had faced the devil and survived. Now they would take the fight to the heart of the jungle. As the fire burned low, Thompson found himself reflecting on the woman's words. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the sacrifices made, and of the strength that came from unity. They were not just soldiers, they were a family forged in the crucible of battle. "Tomorrow we'll confront the shadows," he said, looking around at his squad. "Together." With that, they settled into a restless sleep, the fire flickering beside them, casting a protective glow against the encroaching darkness. Thompson's dreams were filled with images of the jungle, of the devil lurking just beyond the trees, but he felt a sense of peace, knowing they would face it together. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating the clearing and filling the air with a sense of hope. Thompson awoke to the sounds of birds chirping and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. The jungle, once a harbinger of despair, now felt alive with possibility. "Time to move," Miller said, rousing the others. They gathered their gear, the camaraderie between them palpable as they prepared for the day ahead. The woman watched them with a knowing smile, her presence a comforting reminder of the strength they had found. "Stay close," she advised as they set off, leading the way through the dense foliage. "Trust in each other, and you will find your path." Thompson felt a renewed sense of purpose as they navigated the jungle, the shadows no longer feeling as oppressive. They were soldiers, and they would face whatever came next with courage and unity. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the sounds of wildlife surrounded them, a symphony of life that seemed to push back against the darkness. Thompson's heart raced with anticipation, and he could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, ready to reclaim their fate. Suddenly, a rustling in the underbrush caught their attention. Thompson raised his rifle, instinctively scanning the area for any sign of danger. The jungle felt alive, and he could sense that the devil was still out there, prosody lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. "Stay alert," he whispered to his squad, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the sound. The rustling grew louder, and for a moment, Time seemed to stand still. They were poised on the edge of uncertainty, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. Then, from the thick foliage, a small creature burst forth, a wild boar, snorting and scrambling away from them. Thompson let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, and the tension in the group eased slightly. "Just wildlife," Miller said, lowering his weapon. "But it's a reminder to stay vigilant. We can't let our guard down." They continued moving, the jungle thickening around them. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Each step felt like a declaration of their resolve, a testament to their unity. They were no longer just a group of soldiers. They were a team, bound by their shared experiences and the battles they had fought together. As they trekked deeper, the woman led them to a small clearing where the remnants of an old path were visible. "This was once a route used by travelers," she explained, brushing aside some vines. "If we follow it, it may lead us to safety." Thompson glanced at his squad, their expressions a mix of hope and determination. "Let's take it," he said. "It's better than wandering aimlessly." They set off along the path, the underbrush parting slightly to allow for easier passage. The atmosphere shifted, the air charged with anticipation. Every rustle, every snap of a twig had them on edge, but they pressed on, bolstered by the strength of their unity. As they moved, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His instincts were sharp, honed by countless missions, and he could sense the presence of something sinister lurking just beyond their sight. He glanced back at the woman, who seemed to sense it too, her expression serious yet calm. "Stay close," she reiterated, her voice steady. "Trust in each other." They continued along the path, and as they rounded a bend, they stumbled upon a small stream, its water crystal clear and inviting. "Let's take a moment to hydrate," Miller suggested, and they knelt by the water's edge, filling their canteens and splashing their faces. As Thompson drank, he caught sight of their reflections in the water, tired but resolute, a band of warriors ready to face whatever lay ahead. He thought of the stories the woman had shared, of the great warrior who had faced the darkness. They were following in his footsteps, forging their own legend in this unforgiving jungle. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees, followed by a chilling silence. Thompson's heart raced as he instinctively raised his rifle, scanning the treetops. "What was that?" someone whispered, fear creeping into their voice. "Stay sharp," Thompson commanded, his eyes darting around. The jungle had grown eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife replaced by an unsettling stillness. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, menacing silhouette that seemed to blend seamlessly with the darkness of the trees. The devil had come to claim them. "Get ready," Thompson shouted, adrenaline surging through him. The squad instinctively formed a defensive line, weapons raised, hearts pounding in unison. The figure stepped closer, revealing a gaunt face twisted in a cruel smile, eyes glinting with malice. "You think you can escape me?" it taunted, voice dripping with disdain. "You are nothing but lost souls, wandering in my domain." Thompson felt a surge of anger rise within him. "We are not lost," he shouted back, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. "We are soldiers, and we stand together." The devil's laughter echoed through the clearing, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "Unity? You think that will save you? Look around you. You are alone in this jungle, and I will feast on your fear." But in that moment, as Thompson looked at his squad, he felt the strength of their bond. They were not alone. They had each other. "We will not be afraid," he declared, raising his rifle. "We will fight." With that, the squad moved as one, a united front against the darkness. They fired their weapons, the sound of gunfire breaking the oppressive silence, and the jungle erupted into chaos. The devil snarled, momentarily taken aback by their defiance. "Together!" Thompson shouted, rallying his squad. They advanced, pushing back against the shadows, refusing to let fear dictate their fate. The jungle roared to life around them, and for the first time, they felt the power of their unity surge through them like a wildfire. Each shot fired was a declaration of their resolve, each movement a testament to their training and camaraderie. The devil, momentarily disoriented, snarled in frustration, his cruel smile faltering. "You think you can defeat me? I am the darkness that dwells in every heart." But Thompson and his squad were undeterred. "We are not just hearts," he shouted back. "We are a force. We are the light that will pierce your darkness." They pressed forward, the jungle around them transforming from a menacing maze into a battleground. The underbrush crackled underfoot and the air thickened with tension. Each member of the squad moved with purpose, their training kicking in as they flanked the creature, creating a perimeter of fire and determination. Miller, ever the sharpshooter, took aim and fired, the bullet finding its mark in the devil's shoulder. The creature howled, a sound that reverberated through the trees, but it only fueled their resolve. "Keep pushing," Thompson yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. The woman, too, found her strength. She darted forward, brandishing a makeshift weapon, a sturdy branch she had grabbed from the ground. "I am not afraid of you," she shouted, charging at the devil with an unexpected ferocity. The creature turned its attention to her, its eyes narrowing in rage. "Foolish girl. You think you can challenge me?" But she was not alone. Thompson and the others surged forward, flanking her, their weapons raised. "Together!" they shouted in unison, their voices echoing through the clearing. The devil recoiled, realizing the strength of their unity. "No, this cannot be," it screamed, its form flickering as if the very shadows that composed it were losing their grip. Thompson seized the moment. "Now! Push him back!" They advanced, a wall of determination and courage, and with every step the darkness retreated. The jungle itself seemed to respond, the trees whispering encouragement, the wind carrying their battle cries. The devil's form began to dissolve, the shadows that had once cloaked it, now swirling like smoke in the wind. "You may have won this battle," it hissed, voice growing fainter, "but I will return. The darkness is eternal." With one final surge, Thompson raised his weapon and fired, the bullet piercing through the last remnants of the creature's form. A deafening silence fell over the clearing as the devil's laughter faded into nothingness, leaving only the sound of their heavy breathing and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. They stood there, hearts pounding, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Thompson looked around at his squad, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief and triumph. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. "Is it over?" Miller asked, lowering his weapon, his voice trembling slightly. Thompson nodded, though he felt the weight of uncertainty still lingering in the air. "For now," he said, "but we must remain vigilant. The jungle holds many secrets, and we cannot let our guard down." The woman stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We've proven that we can stand together against the darkness. Whatever comes next, we will face it as one." With that, they took a moment to regroup. Thompson felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just soldiers, they were a family forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they would navigate the challenges that lay ahead, united by their shared experiences and the bonds they had formed. As they gathered their gear and prepared to move on, Thompson took one last look at the clearing, the remnants of their battle still lingering in the air. He felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The jungle was vast and unpredictable, but with his squad by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next. "Let's move out," he said, his voice steady. "We have a mission to complete, and we will do it together." With renewed determination, they set off down the path, ready to confront whatever lay ahead in the depths of the jungle, their spirits unbroken, their unity unshakable. The shadows may lurk, but they would not be consumed by them. Together, they would forge their own destiny. As the squad pressed deeper into the jungle, the adrenaline of their recent victory began to fade, replaced by an unsettling quiet that hung in the air like a heavy fog. They moved cautiously, the weight of their experience settling on their shoulders. Each rustle of leaves and distant snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines, reminding them that the darkness they had faced was not entirely vanquished. That night, they set up camp in a small clearing, the remnants of their earlier confrontation still fresh in their minds. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced across their faces, but no amount of warmth could dispel the chill that had seeped into their bones. As they sat around the fire, the woman shared stories of her people, tales of bravery and resilience that had once brought them comfort. Yet, even her words felt hollow against the backdrop of their recent battle. Thompson could see the haunted look in their eyes, the way they flinched at every sound, as if the devil's laughter still echoed in their minds. "Do you think it's really gone?" Miller asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if it comes back?" Thompson took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of doubt within him. "We fought it off. We have to believe that we can face it again if it returns." But even as he spoke, he could feel the cracks in his own resolve. The image of the devil's twisted smile haunted him, a reminder of the darkness that lurked not just in the jungle, but within their own hearts. That night, sleep came fitfully. Thompson tossed and turned, the sounds of the jungle morphing into a cacophony of nightmares. He dreamt of the devil, its gaunt face looming over him, whispering his deepest fears, taunting him with visions of failure and despair. He saw his squad, each member falling one by one, consumed by the shadows that had once seemed so distant. When he awoke, drenched in sweat, he found himself alone in the clearing. The fire had died down to embers, and the jungle was cloaked in an eerie silence. He glanced around, heart racing, and felt the weight of isolation pressing down on him. Where was everyone? "Guys," he called out, voice trembling slightly. A rustle in the underbrush made him jump, and he instinctively reached for his rifle. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw the devil's silhouette lurking just beyond the trees. Panic surged through him, and he fought to steady his breath. "Thompson," a voice called from the darkness, and he turned to see Miller emerging, eyes wide with fear. "Where is everyone? I thought I heard something." "I don't know," Thompson replied, his voice shaking. "I woke up and they were gone." They exchanged worried glances, the fear palpable between them. "We need to find them," Miller urged, and without waiting for a response, he began to move toward the edge of the clearing. "Wait," Thompson called, but it was too late. Miller had already stepped into the shadows, and Thompson felt a surge of dread. "Miller, come back!" But the jungle swallowed Miller's voice, and Thompson was left alone, the weight of the darkness pressing in around him. He felt the panic rising again, and he forced himself to breathe, to think. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself. "You're a soldier. You can handle this." With a deep breath, he stepped into the underbrush, calling out for his squad. "Miller, where are you?" The jungle responded only with silence, the shadows closing in around him. He felt the weight of the night pressing down, a suffocating reminder of the fear that had gripped them all. Each step felt like a descent into madness, the darkness whispering doubts and fears that clawed at his mind. Then he heard it, a soft sobbing sound, barely audible over the rustling leaves. Thompson's heart raced as he followed the sound, pushing through the thick foliage until he stumbled upon a small clearing. There, huddled against a tree, was the woman. Her face was streaked with tears, and she looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Thompson," she cried, relief flooding her voice. "I thought I was alone." "What happened?" he asked, rushing to her side. "Where's the rest of the squad?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "They were here one moment, and then I heard it. The devil's laughter. It felt like it was everywhere, and I couldn't breathe." Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. "We need to find them," he said, determination surging within him. "We can't let it take them." They stood together in the dim light of the clearing, the weight of their situation pressing down on them like the thick canopy overhead. Thompson felt the urgency of the moment. They had to act quickly before the darkness claimed any more of their squad. "Can you remember which direction they went?" he asked, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The woman nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I think they headed towards the river. I heard them talking about scouting for a safe route." "Then that's where we'll go," Thompson said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We'll find them, and we'll do it together." They moved cautiously, the jungle closing in around them as they navigated through the thick underbrush. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs heightened their senses, but they pressed on, driven by the hope of reuniting with their comrades. As they made their way deeper into the jungle, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to shift and flicker at the edges of his vision, and he felt the weight of the devil's laughter echoing in his mind. He glanced at the woman who walked beside him, her face set in determination, but he could see the fear lurking in her eyes. "Stay close," he whispered, gripping his rifle tightly. "We'll get through this." After what felt like hours of navigating the twisting paths of the jungle, they finally reached the riverbank. The water flowed swiftly, reflecting the moonlight in a shimmering dance. Thompson scanned the area, searching for any sign of his squad. "Do you see them?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thompson shook his head, frustration building within him. "No, but they wouldn't have gone far. We need to call out." He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Thompson, to squad! Miller, anyone, respond!" The sound echoed through the jungle, swallowed by the night. They waited, hearts pounding, but the only response was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. "Maybe they're just further down the river," the woman suggested, her voice trembling. "We could follow the bank." "Let's try that," Thompson agreed, though he felt a gnawing doubt in his gut. They moved along the riverbank, calling out intermittently, hoping for a response. The jungle felt alive around them, the shadows shifting as if they were aware of their search. Suddenly, a loud splash broke the silence, and both Thompson and the woman froze. They turned toward the sound, hearts racing. "What was that?" she whispered, eyes wide. "I don't know," Thompson replied, his instincts kicking in. "Stay behind me." As they crept closer to the water's edge, they spotted movement in the darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, drenched and disheveled. It was Miller, his face pale and eyes wild with fear. "Miller!" Thompson exclaimed, relief flooding through him. "Where are the others?" Miller stumbled toward them, gasping for breath. They were taken. I tried to fight it off, but it was too strong. I couldn't hold on." "What do you mean, taken?" the woman asked, her voice rising in panic. "The devil!" Miller shouted, his voice cracking. "It came back. It was waiting for us by the river. I saw it. It took them into the shadows." Thompson felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of despair crashing down. "No," he said, shaking his head. "We can't let it take them. We have to go back. We have to find them." "Are you crazy?" Miller replied, eyes wide with fear. "It's too dangerous. We can't fight it again." "We have to try," Thompson insisted, his voice firm. "If we don't, we'll lose them for good." The woman stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Thompson is right. We can't abandon them. We've faced the darkness before, and we can do it again. Together." Miller hesitated, the fear etched on his face. But as he looked into Thompson's eyes, he saw the determination there, the unwavering resolve that had carried them through their previous battle. "Okay," he said finally, swallowing hard. "But we need a plan." Thompson nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle back onto his shoulders. "We'll approach the area where you last saw them. We'll use the element of surprise and flank it. We know its weaknesses now. We can drive it back." With a renewed sense of purpose, the three of them set off back toward the shadows of the jungle, the river fading behind them. As they moved, Thompson felt the darkness pressing in, the jungle whispering secrets that sent shivers down his spine. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of leaves seemed to echo their fears. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice low but firm. Miller and the woman, he still didn't know her name, nodded, their eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of movement. As they ventured deeper, the sunlight faded, replaced by a dim, eerie twilight. The jungle was alive with sounds, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the ever-present hum of insects. Each sound heightened their awareness. Each shadow seemed to pulse with potential danger. "Thompson," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you really think we can drive it back? Last time it was too strong." Thompson turned to her, meeting her gaze with a fierce intensity. "We've learned from our mistakes. We know what it can do, and we know how to counter it. This time we're not going in blind." Miller cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "What if it's waiting for us? What if it knows we're coming?" "Then we'll be ready," Thompson replied, his tone unwavering. "We have to believe we can do this. We owe it to them." The woman nodded, her resolve hardening. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to be stronger than that." They pressed on, the path becoming narrower and more treacherous. Vines hung like serpents from the trees, and the ground was slick with moisture. Thompson felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him, but he pushed the doubt aside. They needed him to lead, to inspire courage. Finally, they reached a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a small, overgrown ruin. The remnants of a once great structure loomed before them, half consumed by the jungle. Thompson's heart raced as he recognized it. This was where they had first encountered the creature. "Stay alert," he warned, scanning the area for any signs of movement. It could be anywhere. As they moved cautiously into the clearing, the air grew colder, and a palpable sense of dread settled over them. Thompson's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he steeled himself. They had come too far to retreat now. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, sending a chill down Thompson's spine. The sound reverberated in the air, thick with menace. Miller's eyes widened in terror, and the woman gripped her weapon tightly. "There!" she shouted, pointing toward the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Thompson's heart raced as he saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at them, piercing through the darkness. The creature was watching, waiting. "Form a line," Thompson commanded, positioning himself between his companions and the impending threat. "We stand together. We fight together." The creature stepped forward, its massive form emerging from the shadows. It was more monstrous than he remembered, its scales glistening like obsidian in the dim light. The air crackled with tension as it let out another growl, a sound that reverberated through their bones. "Now!" Thompson shouted, and they sprang into action, moving as one toward the creature, ready to face the darkness that threatened to consume them all, before turning away. "We need to regroup and figure out our next steps." As they made their way back through the jungle, the weight of their victory felt heavy on Thompson's shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had merely scratched the surface of a much larger threat. The creature they had just defeated was not the only one lurking in the shadows, and he knew they would have to prepare for whatever came next. "Do you think there are more of them?" Miller asked, his voice barely above a whisper as they navigated the dense foliage. "Probably," Thompson replied, his mind racing with possibilities. "This was just one of many. We need to gather more intel, find out what we're really dealing with." Sarah fell in step beside him, her expression thoughtful. "We should report back to the base. They need to know about this, and we could use more resources, maybe even reinforcements." Thompson nodded in agreement. "Good idea. We need to make sure we're not going in blind again. This time, we'll be prepared." As they reached the edge of the jungle, the sunlight broke through the canopy, illuminating the path ahead. It felt like a rebirth, a moment of clarity after the chaos they had just endured. But even as they stepped into the light, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Keep your eyes peeled," he warned, scanning the tree line. "We're not out of the woods yet." They moved quickly, adrenaline still coursing through their veins as they made their way back to the safety of their camp. The sounds of the jungle faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of machinery and the voices of their fellow team members. When they finally reached the camp, they were greeted with a mixture of relief and concern. The team had been anxiously awaiting their return, and the sight of Thompson, Sarah, and Miller emerging from the jungle brought a wave of questions. "What happened out there?" one of the researchers asked, her eyes wide with worry. Thompson took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "We encountered the creature. We managed to subdue it, but we need to discuss our next steps. This isn't over." The team gathered around, their expressions shifting from relief to apprehension as Thompson recounted their harrowing encounter. He explained the creature's size, strength, and the tactics they had used to bring it down. The more he spoke, the more he felt the weight of their responsibility. "We need to analyze the creature's biology," one of the scientists interjected. "If there are more of them, we need to understand how they operate, their weaknesses, everything." "Agreed," Sarah added. "We can't let our guard down. We need to be ready for anything." As the discussion continued, Thompson felt a sense of unity forming among the team. They were no longer just individuals thrown together by circumstance. They were a cohesive unit, bound by a shared purpose. "Let's set up a watch schedule," Thompson suggested. "We can't afford to be caught off guard again. I want everyone to be on high alert." The team nodded, their determination palpable. They began to organize themselves, assigning tasks and preparing for the next phase of their mission. As night fell, Thompson found himself standing at the edge of the camp, staring into the darkness of the jungle. The sounds of the night were different now, more ominous, more foreboding. He could feel the weight of their victory, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they had only just begun to scratch the surface of the threat they faced. "Thompson?" Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see her approaching. "You okay?" He nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced, just thinking about what's next. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady. "We're in this together, remember?" He smiled, grateful for her support. "Yeah, together." As they stood side by side, Thompson felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but he knew the challenges ahead would test their limits. They would need to rely on each other, to trust in their skills and instincts, if they were to survive what lay ahead. "Let's get some rest," he said finally, turning back toward the camp. "We'll need our strength for whatever comes next." As they made their way back to the warmth of the fire and the safety of their team, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle still held its secrets close. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough to face the unknown. Together, they would confront the darkness, one step at a time. The night enveloped the camp, and the flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the canvas tents. Thompson settled into his sleeping bag, but sleep eluded him. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying the day's events and the creature's haunting growl. He knew they had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As he lay there, he couldn't help but think about the implications of their encounter. What had they awakened in the jungle? What other horrors lurked beyond the trees? He closed his eyes, trying to block out the unsettling thoughts, but they persisted, gnawing at him like a persistent itch. Hours passed and the camp was quiet except for the occasional crackle of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Just as Thompson began to drift off, a sharp noise pierced the stillness, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the night air. His heart raced and he shot up, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Everyone, wake up!" he shouted, scrambling to his feet. The team stirred, confusion etched on their faces, but Thompson's urgency cut through the haze of sleep. "Get to your stations. We're not alone." The camp erupted into chaos as everyone scrambled for their gear, weapons, and flashlights. Thompson's mind raced as he scanned the tree line, straining to see through the darkness. The growl came again, closer this time, sending a wave of dread through him. "Sarah!" he called, spotting her emerging from her tent, weapon in hand. "Get the perimeter lights on. We need to illuminate the area." She nodded, her expression serious, and hurried to the generator. Miller joined Thompson, his face pale but determined. "What do we do if it attacks?" "We hold our ground," Thompson replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We can't let fear take over. Remember what we learned." As the perimeter lights flickered to life, casting a harsh glow around the camp, Thompson felt a surge of resolve. They were prepared this time. They had the knowledge, the experience, and most importantly, they had each other. The growl echoed again, now accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps crunching through the underbrush. "Stay sharp," Thompson warned, positioning himself at the front of the group. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric. Suddenly, the creature emerged from the shadows, its massive form silhouetted against the light. It was even more terrifying than before, its scales shimmering ominously, eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. The team gasped collectively, fear gripping their hearts. "Form a line," Thompson shouted, his voice cutting through the fear. They quickly fell into formation, weapons raised, ready to defend themselves. "On my mark, we fire!" The creature paused, its eyes locking onto Thompson, as if it could sense the challenge in his stance. It let out a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath them, a sound that reverberated deep within their chests. "Now!" Thompson commanded, and the team unleashed a volley of fire. The bullet struck the creature, but it barely flinched, its thick scales absorbing the impact. It charged forward, a blur of muscle and fury. "Fall back!" Thompson yelled, leading the retreat as the creature barreled into the camp, sending tents flying and scattering equipment. "Regroup at the tree line." They stumbled back, adrenaline fueling their movements. Thompson felt a surge of panic as he saw one of the researchers fall, tripping over a fallen branch. "Miller, help her," he shouted, but Miller was already moving, pulling the researcher to safety just as the creature lunged for them. Thompson's heart raced as he took in the chaos. They were outmatched, and they needed a new plan. "We need to lure it away from the camp," he shouted, scanning the area for anything they could use. "Sarah, can you create a distraction?" She nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'll set off some flares. It'll draw its attention." "Do it," Thompson urged, and as Sarah moved to grab the flares, he turned to the rest of the team. "We'll cover her. Get ready." As Sarah lit the first flare, it erupted into a brilliant light, illuminating the night sky. The creature paused, its attention shifting toward the brightness. "Now, Sarah!" Thompson shouted, and she tossed the flare into the distance, the light streaking through the air. The creature roared, its massive form pivoting toward the flare, and in that moment, Thompson seized the opportunity. "Fall back! Move toward the clearing," he commanded, leading the charge away from the camp. They sprinted through the jungle, the sounds of destruction fading behind them. Thompson's mind raced as they reached the clearing where they had faced the creature before. "We can use the ruins of the old temple as a defensive position," he shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "We can set up a perimeter and use the structure for cover." The team quickly regrouped, panting and wide-eyed, their hearts pounding in their chests. They formed a line at the entrance of the ruins, weapons raised, ready to face the creature once more. Thompson glanced at Sarah, who was already preparing another flare, her hands steady despite the chaos. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves," Thompson reminded them, his voice firm. "We're fighting for everyone back at the base. We can't let this thing get to them." The creature's growl echoed through the jungle, a low rumble that sent chills down their spines. It was close, and they could hear the heavy footsteps approaching. Thompson's grip tightened on his weapon, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. As the creature burst into the clearing, its eyes locked onto them with a predatory intensity, Thompson felt a surge of adrenaline. "Now!" he yelled, and the team unleashed a barrage of fire once more. The creature roared in defiance, but this time they were ready. "Sarah, the flares!" Thompson shouted, and she ignited another flare, sending it soaring into the air. The bright light illuminated the clearing, and for a moment they could see the creature in all its terrifying glory, its scales glistening, teeth bared, muscles coiled for attack. The creature lunged, but Thompson and the team were prepared. They ducked and rolled, using the ruins as cover. "Keep moving," he urged, leading them deeper into the structure. "We need to flank it." As they maneuvered through the crumbling stone, Thompson's mind raced with the implications of their encounter. This creature was not just a beast. It was a sentinel of the jungle, a guardian of secrets long buried. They had awakened something ancient, and now they were paying the price. "Thompson!" Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see her pointing toward a narrow passageway. "We can trap it in there!" "Good thinking," he replied, rallying the team. They moved quickly, setting up a makeshift barricade at the entrance of the passage. The creature was relentless, and it charged toward them, but they were ready. "On my mark," Thompson shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Now!" They fired again, and the creature roared, its massive body crashing into the barricade, but they held firm, pushing back with everything they had. The creature was powerful, but they were fueled by determination and the will to survive. Finally, with a final push, they managed to force the creature into the passageway, blocking its escape. It thrashed and roared, but they had done it. They had contained it, at least for the moment. Breathing heavily, Thompson turned to his team, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We need to reinforce the barricade and figure out how to deal with it from here," he said, his mind racing with possibilities. But as they worked, a sense of foreboding settled over him. This victory felt hollow, a temporary reprieve from the chaos that lay beyond. They had faced the creature and survived, but what other horrors lurked in the jungle? What else had they awakened? That night, as they secured the ruins and took turns keeping watch, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely delaying the inevitable. The jungle was vast and filled with mysteries, and they had only scratched the surface. Thompson? Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts once more. What if there are more of them out there? He turned to her, the weight of her question heavy in the air. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, he admitted, his voice low. We need to be ready for anything. As the night wore on, the jungle seemed to whisper around them, a reminder of the dangers that lay in wait. Thompson felt a chill creep down his spine, a warning that they were not alone, that the darkness was still watching, still waiting for its moment to strike. Stay vigilant, he warned the team as dawn broke, casting a pale light over the ruins. This isn't over. We've only just begun to understand what we're up against. And as they prepared for the day ahead, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle held secrets far darker than they could ever imagine. They had survived the night, but the real battle was just beginning, and they would need to confront the shadows lurking in the depths of the unknown. Together, they would face whatever came next, but the warning echoed in Thompson's mind. In the heart of the jungle, danger was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike.